I need to say up front that I grew up camping. My dad took me and my brother out into the backcountry almost every summer since I was 7. So by the time this happened, I was 23 and about as comfortable in the woods as I've ever been anywhere. I'm telling you that, so you understand it wasn't inexperience that made this frightening. If anything, it was the opposite. I knew exactly how the woods were supposed to sound, and that's what made it so wrong. It was early October, a solo trip. 3 nights in a state forest about 2 hours from where I lived. I'd done this same loop before, knew the trail, knew the campsite I liked near a bend in the creek where the ground was flat and the tree cover was thin enough to see stars. The 4 of us who went into those, who went to those, who went to those. Heading out, back Thursday. The same throwaway message I sent him before every trip. He usually just replied with a thumbs up and forgot about it by the next day. I didn't think about that text again until much later. The first night was completely normal. I set up camp before dark, cooked, read for a while by headlamp, and fell asleep to the usual sounds, wind, the creek, and owls somewhere off to the west. Nothing out of the ordinary. It was the second night things changed. I woke up sometime around 2 a.m. to a sound I couldn't immediately place. Not an owl, not wind, not anything moving through brush the way deer or raccoons move through brush. It was rhythmic, steady, almost like footsteps, but slower and more deliberate than any animal I'd ever heard. Circling, the outside of my tent at a distance of maybe 20 or 30 feet. I did what you're supposed to do. I stayed still, listened, told myself it was a deer or a coyote, something with 4 legs that had no interest in me and would move on. The steps continued for what felt like 10 minutes, always at roughly the same distance, always circling, never approaching and never retreating. Then they stopped. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. At first light, I checked the ground around my tent, half expecting to find hoof prints or paw prints that would let me laugh this off as nothing. What I found instead were boot prints, a single consistent set, circling the tent at almost exactly the distance the sound had suggested, close enough in places that whoever made them could have reached out and touched the tent fabric if they'd wanted to. I'll admit my first instinct was still to explain it away. Another camper, maybe, disoriented in the dark, or someone checking on me out of concern after hearing me moving around. It wasn't a good explanation. Nobody does a slow, deliberate lap around a stranger's tent at 2 a.m. out of concern, but it was the explanation that let me pack up calmly instead of panicking, and calm was what I needed. If I was going to hike 2 hours back to the trailhead alone, I broke camp faster than I ever have, and started back toward the trailhead, instead of continuing deeper into the loop like I planned. About 40 minutes in, I heard something behind me on the trail. Not close, just present at a distance, matching my pace almost exactly whenever I stopped to listen. The sound stopped too. I didn't run. I want to be clear about that, because running through unfamiliar backcountry terrain is one of the fastest ways to genuinely hurt yourself, and some very old, very practical part of my brain knew that even through the fear. I kept a fast, steady pace instead, and I started making noise on purpose, talking loudly, like I was on a phone call even though I had no signal out there. I don't know if it helped. I don't know if there was ever really a decision being made on the other end of whatever was following me, but the sound stayed behind me, matching all the way to within sight of the trailhead parking lot. At the lot there was one other vehicle besides mine, a pickup truck, empty, parked at an angle that suggested whoever owned it hadn't been especially careful about it. My car was exactly where I'd left it, doors locked, nothing obviously wrong. I threw my pack in the backseat without really looking at it, got in, and pulled out onto the access road, just wanting to put distance between myself and that trailhead. About 10 minutes down the road, my phone buzzed with a signal for the first time in 3 days. It was Danny, calling, not texting. That alone was strange enough that I almost didn't answer. Danny doesn't correlate texts, always has. I picked up anyway, mostly out of relief at having a signal at all. He didn't even say hello. He said, "Hey, this is going to sound insane, but are you okay? Like right now, are you okay?" I asked him what he meant, and he said he'd woken up that morning with a bad feeling he couldn't shake. Bad enough that he'd pulled up the location I'd shared with him before the trip. Something I do automatically before every solo trip. Something I do automatically before every solo trip and completely forget I've done. The same habit as the text. He said my location had been sitting motionless in the middle of the forest for almost 11 hours overnight, which wasn't unusual for sleeping, except it had stayed motionless well past sunrise, past the time I'd normally be packing up and moving. So he started driving. He was already 40 minutes from the trailhead by the time I picked up. I told him I was fine, that I was already driving out, and I started to explain the footsteps, the boot prints, all of it, mostly to make sense of it out loud for the first time. I was maybe 2 minutes into telling him when I glanced in my rearview mirror out of habit, checking my blind spot before a turn. There was someone in my back seat. I don't remember consciously deciding to react. I remember the car swerving, Danny's voice suddenly sharp and loud through the phone asking what happened, and a hand, an actual hand, gloved, reaching forward from behind my seat toward the wheel. I hit the brakes hard enough that whoever it was slammed into the back of my seat, and in that half second of impact I threw the door open and got out, phone still in my hand, Danny still shouting through the speaker for me to run, to get away from the car. That he was close. Whoever it was didn't chase me onto the open road. They scrambled out the far door instead, and by the time I'd put real distance between myself and the car, they were gone into the tree line, exactly the same way the man had disappeared from the parking lot 2 nights running in every account I later gave the police. I stood in the middle of that access road alone until I saw Danny's headlights come around the bend 8 minutes later. The police searched my car and found what they described as a modified panel behind the back seat, screws removed and reset by hand, just enough room for someone to fold themselves into the space between the seat and the trunk if they knew exactly what they were doing. They think that's how the person had been getting close to me the whole trip, not chasing me on foot at all, at least not the second time. They'd gotten into my car while I was packing up camp that final morning, distracted and rattled, and not thinking to check a locked vehicle I'd left alone for less than 10 minutes, and simply waited. I asked myself sometimes what would have happened if Danny hadn't called exactly when he did, if that stupid throwaway text and the location share I never think twice about hadn't been sitting there the whole time, quietly doing the one job I never actually meant for them to do. I don't send Danny that same lazy heading out pack Thursday text anymore. Now I call him myself, every time, and I make him stay on the phone until I'm back in my car with the doors locked. He still just says okay, and hangs up like it's nothing. I've never told him how close it came to being something. I still camp, but I don't camp alone anymore. And I check my back seat before I ever get in a car parked somewhere I've been away from it, even for a few minutes. Some habits you keep because they're comforting. That one I keep because it's the only reason I'm still here to have any habits at all.